Joining us now, ESPN college football expert, insider, and BYU national champion Trevor Matich on the Deseret First Credit Union Hotline. Trevor, welcome back to BYU Sports Nation. How was your weekend?
Oh, boring. Nothing much happened.
Besides the 108 points that BYU and Toledo put up, right?
Yeah, just besides the point that I had a full head of hair before the weekend, and now I'm completely bald because I ripped out all my hair and the rest of it fell out. I mean, what an amazing, exciting, fantastic finish weekend this was. I mean, so many games, including BYU, came down to the wire in huge games. It was crazy.
Did this remind you of the old WAC, which you played in?
Oh, yeah. Oh, boy. You bet. I mean, you get scores in the 50s. I mean, first one to 50 doesn't necessarily win, which is what happened here in the Toledo game. And that's the way it used to be. I mean, we used to have good defenses. The problem is the offenses were really good, too. And we ended up with these kinds of shootouts. And so that's a lot of fun for fans. I think that hurts fans for baseball, right? Wow, the score is 2-3. How about 62-63?
Trevor Matich with us from ESPN. After 5 games, in your opinion, has the BYU offense officially woken up?
No, but it is stirring. It's stirring. I mean, the running game was phenomenal, clearly, with Jamal Williams. They were going against a smaller defensive front. And you've got to give a lot of credit to some of those backup BYU offensive linemen that have been pressed into duty before they're really ready. And the job that they did to open those holes against Toledo. I think there's progress there. There's progress in the passing game, but there's still more that needs to be done. I mean, in a day when their run-to-pass ratio, BYU's now, was about 2-1, twice as many runs as passes. Taysom only had a 52% completion percentage, and that needs to improve. So we're seeing stirrings. We're seeing some throws that he's making. We're seeing plays that the wide receivers are making. We're seeing the offensive line stay on their feet a little better. But I think what we see is progress now, and I don't know that it's fair to the players to say, okay, they're back, and then judge them on that basis.
So we have the offense the last 2 weeks. They go, 32 points and then 55. And then the last 2 weeks defensively, BYU has given up 35 and now 53. Your thoughts on maybe the reversal there?
Well, I don't know that that's that much of a reversal. I think that they faced 2 phenomenal offenses. I mean, phenomenal. Logan Woodside of Toledo hadn't been sacked coming into the BYU game. He's one of the most effective quarterbacks in the country. A lot of weapons. In the same way with West Virginia. I mean, they play a lot of outstanding offense, and both teams have NFL guys on the offensive side. So that's part of it. Another part of it is that after the grinding start, BYU's lost some guys. I mean, there's injuries on the defense that they're having to deal with that matter. And BYU right now isn't in the place in their recruiting that they have enough depth that it's not going to be a clear drop-off, especially in the secondary. Those things matter as well. I think it's better to look at the BYU defense from the plays that they did make rather than the ones that they didn't make. Because some of those young guys, especially in the secondary, especially freshmen, did a phenomenal job of making a couple of plays when they absolutely had to. And I think that's a good start. I wouldn't look at the raw numbers and be down on the BYU defense. They're fighting and giving everything they've got plus.
BYU did create 2 turnovers, which they turned into 14 points, and that has not been the topic of conversation for the Cougars this season, and that really was the difference. That was obviously good. Jamal Williams was obviously out of this world good. But what was the most impressive thing that you saw from BYU football on Friday night?
What I saw was they had every opportunity to be tired, worn down from the start of the season, dispirited because they had lost 3 games by a field goal or less. And when Toledo came back and was just playing lights out in the second half especially, there was every opportunity to not quit, but to be dispirited. And when you're dispirited, you don't make plays. Well, that's when they did make plays on both sides of the ball. I had special teams, by the way. And so what impressed me the most was their character. I mean, it is clear the way these guys play that they love each other as teammates, that they love their coaching staff, and they're playing hard for each other. And that's huge because whatever the record ends up being, that's a culture that'll carry forward. And it's a hard culture to fix if you don't have it. So that's the thing that impressed me the most.
Jamal Williams sets a BYU single-game rushing record with 286 rush yards, ties a single-game record with 5 TDs. What did you think of the record-setting performance from Jamal Williams?
Man, I thought I was watching Jim Brown in 1970, whatever it was. I mean, seriously, he finished runs with violence, and there was a joy in the violence that he inflicted on defenders, and I love that. When you look at some of the best Alabama running backs, LSU running backs of recent years, you would see them at the end of a run where their journey is over. They're surrounded by defenders. They are maybe pinned into the sideline, so they know they're not going much farther. You'll see them identify a defender and inflict punishment on that guy while the rest of the defenders are tackling you. And you don't do it just because you're told to. You do it because you like it. And that creates a mindset, not just from a standpoint of the infectiousness of it with your own offense, but the defense starts to hate having to stand in front of you because they know it's going to hurt, especially in the fourth quarter. And the joyful infliction of violence on tacklers is the thing that really stood out to me the most about Jamal Williams.
Let's ask you today's Twitter question, Trevor. At the end of the season, what will people be saying about Jamal Williams?
Oh, he's the greatest running back of all time at BYU, and they should. BYU has had some fantastic running backs. I mean, really excellent running backs, guys that went on to the NFL. But when you talk about a complete running back that opposing teams know they have to stop and they still can't, as a runner and as a receiver, I don't think there's anybody better that I've ever seen at BYU than Jamal. And it's not just a matter of being a little guy who can get out into space and make guys miss. When he's got to make his own hole because the blocking's not there, he'll drive through and turn what should be a 1-yard gain into a 3-yard gain. And that's huge, especially in this kind of offense where managing the chains is important. Then, on top of that, the fact that he's got an infectious, positive personality that bleeds over into the rest of the team, I think is an important thing, because off the field, you need guys like Jamal Williams because everybody else takes a cue from him. Everybody else looks at him and decides whether they should be happy or sad, whether they should be frustrated with the season or hopeful at what could be. And Jamal Williams brings all of those things on and off the field, and because of that, if he's not the greatest running back of all time at BYU, then he's in a very, very, very short list.
Number 2 in the country in rushing yards right now with 703, top 5 in touchdowns with his 8. Where does he rank among the nation's top running backs?
One of the very best. Right now, he'd be starting at Alabama, for example. Alabama, they won the Heisman Trophy last year with Derrick Henry. They've got some very talented players over there. But their top 2 running backs are guys that really don't have the entire skill set that Jamal Williams does. And so I think that if he were at Alabama right now, he would be their workhorse starting back. That's how good he is, and he's wearing blue and white at BYU. It's fantastic for BYU fans.
That's quite the statement. And now BYU has the challenge of going at Michigan State. Malik McDowell had a targeting call, big defensive lineman for the Spartans, so he'll miss the first half. BYU struggled to run the ball against good defensive lines with Utah and UCLA. What do you think of this matchup between BYU and Michigan State Saturday?
It's a tough matchup. Michigan State's on the ropes. Wisconsin manhandled them. Manhandled them. And that's not something that happens to Michigan State a couple of weeks ago. Then they lose to Indiana. So they'll come back wounded. And this is not a team that gets down. This is a team that fights back. And so BYU had better be ready for a frenzy from Michigan State. Now, Malik McDowell not being there in the first half is an opportunity that they need to take care of. But to win this game, it comes back to what we've talked about really for the last 2 years. Michigan State, top to bottom, has great talent and more depth than BYU. BYU's got good talent, but their depth I don't think is as good as Michigan State's at this stage in the first year of a new coaching staff with new systems that they're recruiting to. So BYU, first of all, will need to take advantage of McDowell being out because he's a first-round draft choice when he comes out in the draft. The second thing they'll need to do is have the receivers, and this is what I mean when I say we've talked about this. The receivers will need to bear down and play their position like Jamal Williams plays his. They'll need to play with violence. Now, that doesn't mean they need to smash into people, but that means that when the ball is coming towards them, they need to go after that ball and attack it going forward with violence. There will be defensive backs between them and the ball. They need to fight through those defensive backs. There will be defenders' hands up in front of them trying to bat it away or intercept it. They need to fight through that defender's hands with their hands in a violent way. The receivers need to be the baddest dudes on the block if BYU is going to have a chance to beat Michigan State.
BYU at Michigan State, Saturday, 3:30 Eastern, 1:30 Mountain Time. We're with ESPN's Trevor Matich, and we will go with a national perspective now, Trevor. Louisville-Clemson was an all-time classic about 24 hours after BYU and Toledo put up 108 points. What are your thoughts on that epic showdown that capped off an incredible weekend of college football?
Wow, it was a question is whether or not Lamar Jackson, the Louisville quarterback, could go on the road as his first big road test against one of the best defenses in the country and continue what he's done in the beginning of the season. And the answer is absolutely. I was impressed with him because he didn't just go out there and try to make big plays and then get frustrated when the big plays weren't there. As a matter of fact, early in the game, no plays were there. Clemson's defense clamped down on him. But what he did was show that he's making the transition from an athlete to a quarterback with great success. Because when Clemson's defense was having the best of him, he was managing situations. He was not forcing the ball into coverage and doing things that would cause the big mistake to occur. And let the game come to him. Let the big plays come to him instead of forcing them. That's what a patient, veteran, experienced quarterback does. And so I think the future for Louisville is bright. Now, when you look at the national picture, this puts the ACC in a position to have a good argument to have two teams in the playoff. If Clemson and Louisville both win out now, then Louisville will be a one-loss non-conference champion with a win over Houston, because to win out they'll have to beat Houston later in the season. And their only loss being on the road, a tight one, that they were 1 yard away from having a chance to go in for the winning touchdown at the very end of the game. And so this is a scenario that the committee will look at and say that Louisville, even though they didn't win their own division, if it turns out that way, might still be one of the best four teams in the country.
Trevor, great stuff. As an analyst, you'd be starting at Alabama, my friend.
Oh, I appreciate that. That's high praise. I'll be in the huddle with Jamal.
Sounds good, my friend. Thanks for the time.